Hey everybody, I'm John Granado. That's Josh Jordan. You can hear us on ESPN 97.5 and 92.5 and see Josh's work at sportsmaphouston.com. Hit subscribe so you get all of our Texans content right here at SportsMap Texans. Hey, this week, Jeremy Branham of the Killer Bees asked if Nick Caserio is Executive of the Year, noting that Caserio brought in around 12 starters over the offseason. You know what? At first glance, I thought, come on, are you kidding? And now I'm thinking, wait a minute, maybe he is.
If we look at just 2023, which is what the award is for, then he makes a point. I wrote down some of these names he brought in on the one-year deals. Noah Brown, Sheldon Rankins, Singletary, Schultz, Shaq Griffin, Michael Dieter, who's now your starting center, Denzel Perryman, Tevier Thomas, George Fant. That is a lot of guys that are making big deals. Thomas was here before, but it was a one-year deal that he signed this offseason to bring him back. So I think there's an argument to be made. One of the other ones I'd like to point out, do you remember when Caserio was getting a lot of flack for not attending the Alabama Pro Day because he went to the U of H Pro Day instead?
Yeah.
Well, who'd he draft from that U of H Pro Day? He took Tank Dell. So that looked like the right move.
No, and you can't hold it against him, what he did in the past. You're absolutely right. We're talking about 2023, and no one has exceeded expectations nearly as much as the Houston Texans have, right? I mean, they're the toast of the town. They're the talk of everybody. Hey, listen, you got to include the C.J. Stroud decision. You got to include the Will Anderson decision. You got to include the Tank Dell decision. It's now we're hopefully Scruggs will get out there sometime. Forget about what he did last year with Stingley and Kenyon Green and that draft, because it's looking disastrous more and more. But what he has done this year, yeah, absolutely. And we said before the year, because of that last year draft, we said before the year that he could be on the hot seat. Well, and now listen, if they continue to play this way, unless it takes a terrible downturn, all right, is he off the hot seat for you? How much does this success buy him, some time with the fan base?
He's definitely off the hot seat, especially with the organization. But, yeah, with me too. And I think it's a combination, right? It's him and D'Amico working together that I think is the magic sauce. And maybe even a little bit of ownership stepping in and saying, like, we need a swing at a quarterback here. You know, it's up for debate, who made what decision. And there has been some criticism for the Will Anderson trade that maybe he gave up a little too much. But as we sit here now, I'm really happy with it. The other thing is, we saw that report from Carolina that they had a deal in place, a 3-team trade where the Texans were going to move up to number 1. And from what we heard, Bryce Young was at the top of their board. So at the last minute, they backed out. We don't know why or who did what. But either way, I will say this about Caserio, and this goes back a little bit. He did back out of the Josh McCown thing, and that was the right move. It looks like he backed out of trading up to number 1 when you could just take C.J. Stroud at number 2. So sometimes things just kind of work in your favor and you get a little lucky, but also sometimes you make some smart decisions.
Yeah, you got to be a little lucky. And, sometimes the best decisions are the ones you don't make. Yeah. The best moves are the ones you don't make. And moving up to number 1 would have been a horrific. We think, I don't know, with D'Amico and this cast of characters, Bryce Young would be a lot better. I mean, CJ may be in the perfect spot. You find sometimes that you just fall into the right place at the right time. I don't know. I do know that CJ's playing great and Bryce Young isn't playing great, so maybe that wouldn't be the case. But you never know what could happen. Listen, Nick Caserio as Executive of the Year is absolutely not out of the realm of possibility. As a matter of fact, he's got to be one of the favorites this year to be Executive of the Year, and deservedly so. He did a really nice. What about Ridgeway? What about Rankins? There are so many guys that Dalton Schultz. Dalton Schultz. I hope he stays around forever. This has been Nick Caserio, for all the grief that we've given him. He deserves a lot of credit for what he's done this year.
He does. And just one other thing I'd like to bring up with the Texans before the draft. Nobody knew what they were going to do. We were going all the way to the last week, the last few days before the draft. They didn't know if they were going to take a defensive player, if they were going to go quarterback. Yeah. We didn't have any idea about them trading up for Will Anderson. Not like a realistic possibility after getting your quarterback. So there's a lot of things he did well. And finally, I watched him on a podcast the other day where he really kind of, I think it was Peter Schrager's podcast, and they dug into his background. And it's his coaching background that's interesting to me. For the Patriots, he would get ahead of the opponent and be charting what he would hand to the offensive coordinator a few weeks ahead of time. He would go scout these teams and put these reports together. He would do that for the Patriots for years because of his coaching background. It makes me wonder if he does some of that for the Texans now because he has that background in doing it. I know that seems like it's above his pay grade, but when you talk to him and he's interviewed, he's always talking about the next opponent and winning. He's not talking about, oh, we're looking at the draft. He's talking week to week about our best things we can do to win. So I wonder if his coaching background is a really big benefit for him.
Yeah, maybe he should have worked for the University of Michigan and not do it the way they do it, which is terrible, which is cheating. And one more thing about Nick Caserio. We gave him grief for trading away the Texans pick instead of the Browns pick.
Right.
Because we all assumed that the Browns would be better than the Texans. And guess what? If he did that, he would be admitting, he would have said, if they gave up the Browns pick instead of their own, he would have been saying, oh, we think we're going to be worse than the Browns. And that's a bad way to go about it. You know what he did? He bet on the Texans and said, no, we'll give up our pick, okay, and not the Browns pick. And you know what? That's going to work out when we all gave him grief for that. So big ups to Nick Caserio. He's having himself a big year.
And we're all rooting for the Texans. We're not worried about a draft pick. You
right.
know what I mean?
Right.
So each week,
exactly.
you're rooting for them to win each and every week. I love it.
Yep.